Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to the last panel today. Data centers, large energy consumers, or change agents in the energy transition. We will hear a short presentation, and then our moderator, Lars Greiner, Associate Partner, Middle East and Africa for HBC, Hamburg Port Consulting, is going to moderate the panel. So enjoy, and yeah, see you all back tomorrow.
Wasn't that a great movie? Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. Normally I say ladies and gentlemen and gentlemen and gentlemen, but I can't say that here today, and I'm very pleased that almost half of us are females. So great, yes, please. Well, 2 years into the corona pandemic, we have learned that digital meetings have been a huge contributor to keep the wheels running. But it is indeed not possible to cooperate, find sound solutions to great challenges without meeting people face to face. I will therefore give special thanks to the administration of this conference for being able to have us here together safe with excellent logistics during a pandemic situation is really outstanding. So thank you so much. I'm also addressing this because I believe in the importance of technology and cooperation. Traveling all over the world as the former Minister of Public Security and most and foremost as a Deputy Minister of Petroleum and Energy to Norway, cooperation and technology, in addition to common understanding of the challenge, is really the key enabler of finding successful solutions. It goes without saying that the dominant global trend is the transition away from fossil fuels to achieve the goal of a net zero world. That being said, we have to acknowledge that along with the essential advances in the development of renewable and sustainable sources of power, such as solar, geothermal, and wind, and traditional sources such as oil and gas, will continue to play a critical role in the global energy mix, potentially for decades to come. At the same time, there are other mega trends closely linked to the transition, which demand our attention, and I will address two of them here today. Firstly, while seeking to transition to more sustainable, environmental friendly sources of energy, the world is, in fact, in deep need of more energy. And just as one example, demand growth for electricity to power data center services is expected to grow exponentially in the few years, with some forecast estimates that as much as 20% of global power use by 2025, up from 1% in 2060. At the same time, as demand is increasing, we see examples of poor energy management every day, whether from renewable sources such as solar and wind, or traditional fossil fuels like oil and gas, as said earlier. The scale of wasted energy is truly staggering. IEA estimates that approximately 30% of total global energy production was lost or wasted or not utilized in 2021, while the World Bank estimates up to 150 billion cubic meter of gas is flared every day. And to give you some context, that amount of gas could power the continent of Africa or the entire fleet of cars in Europe. And it is also about 150% of what Norway exports every year of gas, as the third largest gas-producing country in the world. Not only does this waste have a significant environmental impact, but it also has important implications for resource utilization and allocation, and for essential investment in infrastructure and technology, and especially in the case of renewable power projects in remote locations in the developing world. This, in turn, impacts availability of energy, notably across Africa, where access to reliable energy is consistently ranked in the top 5 bottleneck to industrialization, according to the World Bank. And an estimated 60% of people across the continent are without any access to electricity. Improving the performance of existing technologies and encouraging investments to bring new innovations to market will therefore be crucial to tackle these challenges, not just from an environmental perspective, but also in conferring lasting economic benefits for innovative businesses and for the countries and communities in which they operate. By harnessing technology and through innovative and agile initiatives and applications, there are cost-effective opportunities to bring down the emissions intensity of oil and gas production by, for example, minimizing flaring, and to encourage the much-needed investments into renewable infrastructure to support a sustainable and just transition to a net zero world. The issue of investment in renewable infrastructure is extremely important. In many parts of the world, and Africa especially, solar and wind are on track to become the cheapest form of energy in the coming years. However, this means nothing without meaningful investment into the infrastructure required to capture and utilize this energy. The IEA already estimates that 70% of total investments in this space needs to occur in developing countries. So providing incentives for these projects are essential. A second related megatrend I would like to draw your attention to is digitalization. As stated a moment ago, the world needs more energy in general. But as this trend develops, the data centers that enable this process of digitalization will form an increasingly critical and an energy-intensive part of our infrastructure. It is worth restating a statistic I mentioned a few moments ago. Demand growth for electricity to power data center applications can reach as much as 20% of global use of electricity by 2025. With young populations and growing economies, Africa perfectly encapsulates this trend. With the UN forecasting 50% of global population increases by 2050 will take place on the continent, and urban population sets to grow by 50%, there are clearly significant requirements to power this digitalization of the economy to meet the demand implied by this demographic shift. Against the backdrop of the transition, how do we meet the ever-increasing demand for power for data centers and high-performance computing applications such as blockchain, machine learning, and the Internet of Things? Having spent many years working in government at the intersection of these issues as Norway's Deputy Minister for Petroleum and Energy, I have seen firsthand the need to solutions that can meet these challenges head-on. And this is the key driver behind the foundation of Earth, Wind and Power. Being a Norwegian firm developing and deploying technological solutions to tackle environmental challenges within the sector is part of our DNA. And we are proud to play our part with unique solutions to the challenges of wasted excess energy and the exponentially growing demand for energy to power digitalization. For traditional sources of energy, we utilize gas that would otherwise be wasted through flaring by deploying modular data centers on site, allowing us to power a wide range of high-value computing applications. This provides an offtake for the previously wasted energy, with substantially reducing the environmental impact by eliminating non-combusted methane emissions from flaring by almost 100%. Crucially, Earth, Wind and Power solutions also support and incentivize much-needed solar and wind projects, which often struggle to attract investments due to the challenges of intermittent power generation and the cost of building the necessary infrastructure to connect to the grid, often in remote areas. Offering an immediate offtake without needing any prior connections to the grid provides certainty and cash flow that can act as an incubator for these projects and encourages further investments. These benefits for both traditional energy producers as well as nascent solar and wind projects, as they occur in parallel with providing power to meet the increasing demands from data center services that are essential contributors to continued global growth. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the mega trends associated with the energy transition present clear opportunities for innovation and collaboration to create new commercial value and enhance ESG standards. At Earth, Wind and Power, by matching the energy surplus from one industry to the energy deficit of another, we can create economic and environmental benefits for all stakeholders while ensuring that no one is left behind in the transition into the net zero world. We will all be winners, also today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingvil. Now we move across to the panel discussion, and I'm going to start the panel discussion just asking each of the fellow panelists to quickly give an introduction as to who they are and what their position on the data centers moving forward in regards to sustainability might be. I'll start with Dr. Hay.
Just to introduce myself, Dr. Angus Hay. I'm group executive with Africa Data Centers. That really is our name. We're not just Africa Data Centers. We are actually called Africa Data Centers. But I'm also today representing the Africa Data Centers Association, which represents a number of different data center providers that are rolling out across the African continent. We are at a very interesting time for data centers. We're actually hitting the cusp of a very rapid transition from smaller co-location data centers that you could count in the tens of megawatts to the kind of cloud infrastructure that we can start to count across the continent in the hundreds to thousands of megawatts potentially. And what we're finding at the same time is that as data centers, we have a unique role to play. Utilities don't always think of us as being that important. I think they still think it's 1%. And I think as we see that massive growth, which is driven by the cloud and our customers in particular as data center providers, we are seeing that at the same time, those very same customers are driving the green transition. So we are expected to deliver data centers that are sustainable and that have renewable energy sources, and we're becoming the drivers of that transition.
Thank you very much. My name is Nelisiwe Magubane, and I am the chairperson of the Great Karoo Energy, Renewable Energy Solution. And we are currently developing a project of about 500 megawatts in the Northern Cape as a start, but eventually we're looking at about 1,000 megawatts of energy production in that regard. The reason I was invited into this panel is that I actually developed the smart grid vision for South Africa, and on behalf of SANEDI. SANEDI stands for the South African Energy Development Institute. And what I did when I was developing that vision, I realized that digitization is going to be playing a very, very important role in making sure that our grids are smarter, our energy is developed more efficiently, and also we are able to have a situation where we're able to send energy but also receive energy as the municipalities. So basically that is what I am doing now. At this point in time, I am looking forward to looking at the data centers as the engine room that is going to be making sure that we are able to have the smart grids, and also making sure that our energy system is operated more efficiently, and we see as little wasted energy as possible.
Can you hear me? Yes, working. My name is Dion Henriksen. I'm the Vice President of Siemens Smart Infrastructure. And I think in terms of reason for being on the panel, we've obviously got quite a lot of technology that fits into the data center space in terms of energy transition as well. I think it was interesting listening to what Ingvil had to say about the excess energy and making use of that. You know, there's batteries that you can store it in as well, so that makes a lot of sense. And we've got a lot of other technologies as well fitting into the data centers. You know, as listening to what Nelly was saying about the greater Karoo, you know, maybe even going and putting a data center down in the middle of the Karoo, where potentially there is solar, and using that to power the data centers. So I think there's a lot of thoughts that we can throw around. I think one of the other things that we do bring to the table as well is, as an OEM, we do have a center of competence that does a lot of designs, have a look at different technologies that we can put into that space, and look potentially at not having the energy growing exponentially, but potentially putting in some energy saving solutions as well, and seeing what we can do. So, yeah, hopefully we can bring some of that to the table.
Thank you. My name is Jovita, so I work for Microsoft. I also sit on the board of the Africa Energy Chambers. I sit on the Energy Transitions Committee and on the Regulatory Affairs Committee. I'm here today to, first of all, learn, listen to all of you, but also to share a little bit of what, as a technology company, we're doing in terms of energy transitions, right? In terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and what we are doing with companies that are embracing digitalization, or digital transformation, as we like to call it, or some people would want to say Industry 4.0, to mitigate the impact. So as we start talking, I'll share with you some of those approaches that we are adopting, and we believe that the impact is going to be great.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go straight back to Ingvil, and I'm going to kick things off saying, one thing I've learned this week already is that really the whole transition, or the Industry 4.0, as Joe has put it, is a lot to do with a transition, but really it's difficult to separate the transition to sustainability from energy, from digitalization. We need the digitalization to drive sustainability, and sustainability will help create more efficient energy. So after COP26 in Glasgow, what do you see are the responsibilities of the data center industry moving forward?
Well, it's huge, I think, because as you say, it's driving energy demand to have this transition and to have digitalization, which is needed, as you also said, and as I said it also in my speech, to have the digitalization. It's what comes first, the hen or the egg. But I also think that we have to educate the population of how much data we actually use every day. Sending an emoji is actually pollutional, because you have to think of what created that energy to send that emoji as well. So it's really complicated to do something about it. But I think that what Earth, Wind and Power, we are the solution provider for this, because we really see that the excess energy, the energy not used or stranded, is that huge. 150% of the gas export of Norway, as the third largest gas exporter in the world, are flared. And that's just for flaring, that's just for gas. But we know that there's a lot of excess energy also in solar, in wind, and geothermal. So what we are doing is taking that responsibility very seriously, having an ESG stamp on the digitalization and the data center services that we provide, is both to take the excess energy, the energy that are not used, but we are also outside the grid. We're not cannibalizing the energy that could go to other industries, to the population of the world, or the countries that we are within, because we are at the outside. And we know that also in Norway these days, the electricity bills are rocket high. So intervening in the grid for the data centers as well would increase the demand and the need for building out the infrastructure even more. So I think that we have a huge responsibility to do something about it, and as you said as well, reduce the energy that we need for digitalization as well.
I think that was going to be my
long
next
answer.
Long answer, but a good answer. I think I saw lots of heads nodding around the table here, so I see lots of agreement. You touched on it already. My next question was going to be directed at Dion to say, as an OEM, that what she's saying is a crucial for you as well. It must be very, I think the data centers are huge users of energy, and you must be striving in a lot of ways for more efficiencies. How do you see that developing from an OEM point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of energy usage, I think one of the key energy usages is the cooling in a data center. And when you walk, typically if you walk into a data center, I've been into a couple, and it's freezing. Is it really necessary to be that cold? Is it necessary to be that cold throughout the data center? And as an OEM, we've got some technology which makes use of mesh centers around the room, where you can more effectively control temperature. And I think that's one of the keys. I think in terms of some other things, we spoke about the use of batteries at the moment. And in terms of COP26 and energy transition, typically what happens if the power fails, and I'm not sure if that's what happened here, a big dirty diesel generator turns on. There's alternative technologies. I mean, there's the excess. I mentioned the batteries earlier as well. And if we had to, for example, make use of batteries, it changes the whole playing field. Instead of having the diesel generator that turns on in a couple of minutes, you now have batteries which turn on a lot faster, so you don't need as big UPSs. So there's a lot of stuff that we can bring into that.
Certainly, I mean, I've used the example several times of our terminal in Hamburg. We're the first fully sustainable non-emissions terminal in the world, and we want to run very much off batteries. And the advantage of batteries, in addition, is that using sustainable energy generation, such as wind and solar, you can store it in the batteries and then put it back into the grid where you need it. But then carrying along with the theme, Dr. Hay, as a user of the technology, then how do you see the ways to develop the data centers then?
So maybe to start with one of the key elements, we talk about the growth of data centers in terms of demand of energy, and that is certainly true. I mean, there's a massive growth in that demand. But I think we also need to understand what the alternative to that might have been. A lot of distributed users with their own offices and a diesel generator in the basement and their own separate facilities are actually far less energy efficient and far more likely to be unsustainable than centralized data centers. So by aggregating the demand, co-location data centers, and particularly the very substantial cloud data centers, I mean, certainly the major cloud providers in the world are, run extremely large loads, but they're operating at high efficiencies. We have a term in the data center industry called power usage effectiveness, or PUE, which is basically a measure of the ratio between how much power goes into everything, including the cooling, versus how much goes into the IT equipment. And at the moment, typical PUEs on the African continent can be from 2 down to maybe 1.5. We at the moment are starting to build at about 1.3. In the cutting edge of that technology, we can get down to 1.2, maybe even 1.1. On the African continent, that's a bit challenging because it's a bit warm outside, so the aircon does have to operate sometimes. But the point is that we focus very, very sharply on improving that PUE, and it's not just us. Our customers actually give us targets. So we not only have targets in terms of our performance from service levels, etc. We actually have energy efficiency targets that are written into the contracts that our customers give us. And that, I think, is an interesting driver. It's unusual compared to other industries in that those targets are what we work to. So that's exactly what we see. So we talk to suppliers like that because we have to drive that energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jovita, how do you as a major organization in that regard see the drive towards these efficiencies? And also see the requirement that's coming to show your carbon footprint in regard to that?
I totally agree with what he just said, right? When it comes to power usage efficiency, if you compare what would have happened if companies were not moving to the cloud, they would have been running their own silos of data centers. And if you think about that, it would have probably been less efficient than what you see today. But that notwithstanding, we still have digital transformation that is requiring all these services to run non-stop, 100% of the time. And that is where we're headed, right? So the first thing that we want to do is accept that there is an impact of digitalization on climate. That is the approach that we've taken as a company and as an industry. And what we are doing is, number one, to use a data-driven approach to tackle this problem. If you take Microsoft, for example, by 2025, the company has committed to be 100% renewable energy. By 2030, the company wants to be carbon negative, and by 2050, it will be carbon neutral. So, and that is what you see across the industry. Google is doing the same, AWS is doing the same. As I just heard from my good friend there, we have data centers across the world, and we write those things in the contracts for all those data centers. And as a matter of fact, Microsoft just released what we call the emission impact dashboard, where customers could actually see where their energy is coming from and pick from the less pollutant sources of energy. So as one of the things that we can do is to continue to provide what we call emission transparency so that our customers can actually decide where they want to host their data.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Magubane, I saw you nodding the whole way through, so I'm going to hand over to you to carry on.
No, thank you very much. I cannot agree more with Dr. Nsoh in the sense that our customers now are more aware of the
Now, Africa's got a unique chance now to actually jump technology, to join in with everyone else at the same stage. If they don't take the opportunity now, if they sit on the beach and watch everyone learn to surf, by the time they get into the rollers in the end, when they will be forced to, they'll be behind again. So it really is a chance now for Africa to move forward. Ingvil.
I just wanted to say something about the renewable energy that you should use only the renewable energy to power digitalization. I'm for that, but I also want to say a little bit about gas, because we're at this continent, 60% of the people here don't have access to any energy. And there's a lot of gas in the different countries in Africa that are not being used. So I think also to say that to use gas as a driver, as a power to the digitalization and the data center services should be accepted. It's much better than coal. And I really think that we have a moral responsibility to also look at gas as an energy transition for the renewables. I really need to say that. It's so important. As the deputy minister, former deputy minister, I said gas is king. Never forget gas in the energy mix. It's needed.
And of course, most Africans will know that the biggest gas finds in the world are all around the African continent. Exactly. I think one of the things that has disturbed me a little bit during this week is it seems to be an either-or situation. What we all need to remember is that it's really a migration. We're starting a journey right now, and as I said, we are going to fall off and we're going to make mistakes. But it's not for us to turn off the energy, the carbon energy now. I don't think in my life we will turn it off. But we need to start the migration now, and we need to start it effectively. The African countries are not the major users of energy at the moment. We need to start that energy usage and then migrate it over time aggressively. So absolutely, I think we need to start weaning ourselves off the bad stuff onto the better stuff as part of a journey. But now we're digressing. Now we're going on to we have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I'm going to start with Dr. Jovita again. I'm going to say, what do you see as the real challenges, short term and then long term, towards the data center industry?
Short term, it is the fact that we are still transitioning, as you rightly say, right? Which is that you're going to have duality of all less clean energy and the whole idea of renewable energy. So we have to embrace that hybrid mode. The second short-term challenge that we have is actually communicating this to stakeholders. It is also our own social, environmental responsibility, like you mentioned about sending an emoji. Right? So that is what I see short term. But long term, it is a question of us recalibrating our civilization in such a way that it is sustainable, because we are moving further and further into digitalization and there is no turning back. It is a question of what happens, how do we do it? And we want to go back to our own moral compass and say, hey, how do we do this in a way that we can guarantee the sustenance of our climate on our world?
Thank you. Ingvil?
Well, I think I should say energy management and energy efficiency as both in long and short term, actually. Because I agree, you have investments for 8 and 9 and 10 years, so it's difficult to have always the latest technology because it's developing so fast all the time. But I think that utilize the energy that actually is there already as Earth, Wind and Power deliver solutions of, but also to reduce that kind of energy used for the digitalization or the data center services. And one of those is not using the energy you actually don't need for services that doesn't need 100% uptime. So I think that's the short and long-term needs.
Dion, what do you see as the short and long-term challenges?
So I think one thing that is key, and Lars, you mentioned it, we need to realize that this is an energy transition. And I think that's what we've been talking about. We are going to migrate to a final goal. So I think that's quite key. I think the one thing that is happening right now as well is the price of components is coming down so dramatically as well. And if I had to think about batteries, for example, I want to say 6 months, 12 months ago, it was sort of $500 per kilowatt hour. We're now looking at sort of $350 per kilowatt hour. In another year's time, we're probably down at about $250 per kilowatt hour. So, in terms of planning for the future as well, again, it comes back to that transition. scalability, modularity. If we are going to be building data centers for 10, 15, 20 years, in terms of powering and repowering, potentially looking at modular type concepts. So, you know, I'd just throw that in the mix.
That's scary. When you said scalability, I suddenly had a picture of the Matrix in my head.
No, in my view, I think the biggest challenge, both the short and long term, is cybersecurity. Because once you start looking at digitization, then you've got these very, very clever people who actually are able to invade our issues like in the matrix. And we basically are looking at making sure then that we're always a step ahead from that situation. And also going back to the issue around the transition, I totally agree that gas is going to be the transition towards fully renewable energy programs, because at this point in time, we need to make sure that we utilize what we have as resources, because when it's all said and done, as much as when you go to COP26, we're not at the same space. Brazil is already 80% there, because mainly their energy generation is hydro. Okay, and we South Africans were right down at the bottom of the rung. So we definitely need to utilize gas as a transition energy.
I'm going to look at this from the perspective of data centers with regard to power and energy on the African continent. And you know, we have a lot of challenges, but if I just narrow it down to look at energy, our primary short-term challenge is regulation. If you look at just South Africa, which we like to think of it as being at the forefront, only this year have we been able to build on-site generation greater than 1 megawatts. We haven't yet seen the final version of the regulation to allow us to wheel power so that an individual company can buy IPP power. We haven't transitioned into that market that enables us to drive that energy transition. We're still held back by regulation, and a number of African countries have that same mindset and the same approach, which is holding back some of that transition because it really sits in the hands of a national power utility or individual companies that control that. In the longer term, I think we have a much wider obligation as data centers, and that is to the people of the African continent, because we need to be leading this digital transition and this digital migration that needs to happen. And we need to make the African continent attractive to the rest of the world as a place for digitalization and for the digital economy. And part of doing that is making it possible to deploy data centers and to grow to that I like the goal of 25%, 20%, of being able to grow data center capability, for which we need reliable, sustainable sources of energy on the continent, much as we can drive the development of the continent in terms of energy. We're also driving the development of the people on the continent by bringing them into that digital world.
Which I think brings us very nicely back to the energy and the energy poverty question, and the how do we address energy poverty in Africa in order to drive digitalization on the continent forward. So we've come full circle really, and I think we're now just time to wrap up, and I'm going to go in the opposite again from Dr. Hay through to the other side. I'm just asking for closing remarks from everyone.
So I think I think that data centers are inexorably tied to energy. Anybody who's looking at investment, I mean, we're putting hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into data centers. And the number one question we ask ourselves when we look at a place to deploy a data center, I mean, when we look at distributing data to what we call the edge in data center terms, to localization within countries, the number one question we ask is energy. It's the source of power. Is it available? Is it reliable? Is it sustainable? And so data centers and energy are two sides of the same coin. And I think it's really important that we understand that, that lack of progress in energy means lack of progress in data centers, means lack of progress in digitalization.
Thank you very much for that, and I cannot agree more with what you've just said. But going back to the issue of energy poverty, I firmly believe that data center are going to play a very critical role in eliminating energy poverty, in the sense that we are not going to be having long transmission line from Democratic Republic of Congo all the way to South Africa. It's not going to happen. What we are going to be needing is that we need to make sure then that we have got more localized energy solutions, and those energy solutions are going to be able to need, they are going to need data in order to make sure that appropriate energy solutions are provided for those particular communities, and also making sure that those particular communities are able to run their own businesses. They are able to develop their own communities at the end of the day. So the availability of data and also the development of data centers are going to be crucial in ensuring that we eliminate energy poverty in Africa.
Thank you. I think in terms of the perspective from the OEM, we've got a lot of technologies that we can throw in. I think in terms of where do we start, the availability of energy and the distribution of energy, there's a lot of products to do all of that, but also and I mentioned earlier the reduction of energy consumption, making sure that it's being used effectively. Again, throwing technology at it is definitely something that can make a lot of sense, and ensure that the energy growth, the demand of energy is not growing necessarily exponentially. So I think that is something that we do need to have a look at.
I see that we can use data centers as a breakage of renewable energy, building renewable energy. As Earth, Wind and Power offers, is that we can be a off-taker of the energy from, for example, a solar planet or a wind planet station immediately without a grid. So in that way, we make the investment in renewable energy possible, economically viable for smaller grids, because we can be the off-taker and afterwards they can build the grid around it. So in that way also we can help small villages having energy, so the energy poweredness can be helped by the data center industry. So we have to think outside the box. How can we solve the problems in the future with something else that we don't have, but with the knowledge and experience we have, just to think differently. And that's what we have done in Earth, Wind and Power. We've put together some people from different industries and knowledge, and to try to find solutions of challenges we don't know by now. And that's why Earth, Wind and Power came up, because we saw solutions that hadn't been solved earlier. So I think that data centers and the data center industry has possibilities to solve these problems, but just in quite another way that we see today. And I just want to say also, as a former Minister of Cybersecurity to Norway, absolutely, data sovereignty and having storage of data inside the country is really, really, really important. I don't think, especially not in Norway, what's challenging for the state is not soldiers marching over the border as it was in the Second World War. It is cybersecurity. So we need to get hold of the data of the state, and we need to know where it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, in my perspective or opinion, what we can do to reduce energy poverty is actually already happening from a technology standpoint, whereby we are empowering everyone in the world to actually unleash their own full potential, in the sense that We bring technology to you in various ways. You have your small devices in your hands, in your home, regardless of where you are in the world, right? That is what technology is ultimately doing. I tend to use the word we are democratizing opportunities. And the way to do that is to actually solve the problem of physics, which in our IT what we call latency. It used to be people would leave and go to where work is. Today, the internet is your office. You can do it anywhere. And for you to be able to do that effectively, you want to have data center close to you, which is why as an industry, or as a company, Microsoft is actually moving towards modular data centers, including edge technologies that can run off the grid, right? We could have a data center dropped in the desert and operate using satellite links and solar. But to answer your question about reducing energy poverty is for all of us to harness the potential of digital transformation, not just for social media, but to actually improve our own skills and take advantage of the fact that you can work from anywhere. To that effect, we have started 2 development centers in Africa, one in Nairobi, one in Nigeria, where we are training young people and putting them in the economy. So I think that is a good start, but we're going to see more and more as the whole concept of an office being a building where you live and go every morning is challenged.
Thank you very much, all the panelists. I've learned so much this session. It really has empowered me, and I hope it's empowered everyone else as well. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, the panelists, for your input. I wish everyone a good evening, and we'll see you bright and breezy in the morning.